Good day, dear friends. And today we have a dear guest with us, a dear friend, Regis Tremblay. For those of you who don't know Regis, and I've been on his program several times, I've had that pleasure. Those of you who don't know Regis, Regis is a documentary filmmaker, an American who is now, I may say, in exile in a horrid place called Yalta. I mean, there's palm trees, beaches, good weather. It's a horrible place to be in exile, absolutely. Uh, One of the worst. Makes Siberia look like a vacation hotspot. And Regis, since 2016, he's been making documentaries showing Americans' life in Russia, the horrid life in a palm trees and then beach vacation area. Regis, glad to have you on the show.
Your forefathers were the salt of the earth, but they understood that that earth did not need the salt of their tears. Be it the tyranny of heartless elites, kings and emperors drafting fathers and sons to their endless wars, persecution by the godless revolutionaries, or a dozen other reasons. They made the hard decision. They picked up their families and headed to new lands, to new opportunities and sometimes new dangers, crossing oceans and a wild frontier. They faced incredible challenges and traumas, and they succeeded. And now, generations later, it is you who finds himself in the same shoes at a similar crossroads as your forefathers. It is you who knows that the land you call home is no longer recognizable as home. That all your hard work, what was built over generations, is just another pandemic away from being seized. The freedoms your forefathers fought for are hanging on by a shoestring, with globalist billionaires and conglomerates coveting your land. As the powers that be may plan to draft your sons and your daughters for their foreign adventures. It doesn't matter if you're American, Canadian, or Australian. Your children's future is no longer bright. You're the new Afrikaners marked for expropriation. The militantly woke no longer have a place for your faith in God or your big families. And they're coming for your land and the water rights that have sustained your family farm, your way of life. What is to be done? And where do you turn? There is hope. There is a land. The last great Christian land that loves farmers, loves big families, and loves God. A place where land is bountiful and very affordable. The government's not intrusive, taxes are low, and your faith and big families are not only welcomed, but celebrated. That land is Russia. And exitstrategy.world is here to help you make this hopeful future a reality. We will assist you in organizing your move, opening new accounts, moving your hard-earned wealth across borders, procuring farmland and documents. A prosperous future belongs to those with the courage to show up for it. Exitstrategy.world. Exitstrategy.world, the new Mayflower of the 21st century.
Oh, thanks, Stas. It's really good to be with you.
So tell us about your career, how you got started, and how you got to Russia.
Well, but I've had several chapters in a career, but somewhere around 2006, I started documenting protests against what was happening to the environment. I was living in the state of Maine. Then there were protests, anti-war protests that were really quite large at the time against the first Iraq war, against the second Iraq war, against the attempted war on Syria. And I filmed, dozens of these protests. Many of my friends were arrested. And I posted all of these things everywhere that I could, primarily YouTube. But what really changed my life and turned me into really a very radical anti-American activist, anti-imperialism, anti-war, anti-the government in the United States, was a film. The first film that I made was called The Ghosts of Jeju. It's always been free on YouTube and other platforms. I went to Jeju Island, a small island off the south coast of South Korea, in 2012. Some people provided some funding that paid for part of the transportation. They wanted me to make a short film, 10 to 15 minutes, documenting this 24/7, 7-year protest by the people of this village and their sympathizers from Korea and around the world that have been going on for, as I said, for 7 years. Well, I spent a month there.
Protest. It's a daily protest that's been going on for 7 years.
24/7, day and night, against the construction.
And no one in the U.S. has heard about this ever, as far as I know.
Well, they have now, but they hadn't until then. And so I spent a month there, and what I discovered was not what I expected. It turns out immediately after World War II, when the Japanese were thrown out of Korea after some close to 40 years of violent occupation, the people on this tiny island were peasants. And they thought they had been freed, only to find out it was the United States military government in Korea that was now running the country. And the people rejected this. They rose up. They were armed with sticks and stones and shovels and spears. No weapons. And the United States military government feared that this was a communist uprising and that it would spread. And what they ordered, commanded, they trained the constabulary. Couldn't have an army. It was, many of them were Japanese. They trained them and sent them to massacre these people on this island. It was a free fire zone. Somewhere between 30,000 and 60,000 of these peasants were massacred.
Wow.
Between 1946 and 1947, in a little bit less than a year.
So
well, I discovered this.
Let me, sorry, I'm going to interrupt. So for people who aren't familiar with history, this isn't during the Korean Wars. This isn't during the northern invasion, Korean invasion of South Korea. This was between World War II and the Korean War. Peace.
Absolutely correct. Before the American War and the Koreas. So this was really significant. I was so angry at what I had learned, and I actually cried. I couldn't believe that my government would do such a thing. So I returned home, and rather than make a short video of the protest, I ended up spending several weeks and months doing research at the National Archives, and I finished the film, The Ghost of Jeju, which was not very well received by American film festivals or the film industry. I had to travel across the country twice, Stas, from city to city, showing the film in libraries, in churches, in people's living rooms. I even one time showed the film outdoors to 3 people. So I made 2 trips, and I offered copies of the DVD for a donation so that I could get to the next city. Well, Stas, what happened was really a miracle. I asked people to share the video with as many people as they could, show it in their church, in their living room, in their libraries, wherever. And of course, it was free on YouTube. Stas, in no time, this video went all over the world. It was the first time that this atrocity had been publicly revealed anywhere in the world. Under penalty of death and your family disappearing in South Korea, if they were to talk about
In democratic
If
South
they
Korea,
were,
there's a penalty.
well, it was under the dictator.
Well,
It was
yeah,
under several dictators,
but
and
officially they're
until the
democratic.
year that's correct. But until the year 2000, this was undercover. You could not talk about it. And so what happened was it went around the world. The Koreans were the first. I gave them a file, the original file. They put their own subtitles on it and toured South Korea. Mandarin Chinese, it was translated into Mandarin Chinese. Several years later, people in countries like France and Italy and Spain said, we need to show this film in our country. Can we have your permission to put subtitles on it? Again, I gave them the film. No royalties, nothing. Just please share this film with as many people as you can. Well, now it's 7 languages, including Russian, and it was premiered in Russia for the first time last November at the Sochi International Film Festival, where it was extremely well received. So this film really changed my life profoundly, turned me into radical activist, and changed the trajectory of my life, which very soon in 2016 led me to Odessa on the 2nd of May, the second anniversary of the massacre in 2014. Opened my eyes. I saw neo-Nazis. I saw real Nazis. And then I returned. I went to Russia, returned again in 2018 and 2019 to document the citizen diplomacy delegations that traveled around to different cities in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of 2019, I made a third film. It was called Who Are These Russians and Why Do We Hate Them? But the film, the reason I came to Russia was to finish a film called 30 Seconds to Midnight, which was about the imminent threat of a nuclear war between the United States and Russia. That was 2016. And at the end of that film, I said, will the neocons in Washington, realizing
Okay. Microphone. Your microphone is off.
Yeah, I got interrupted there.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the film, I said, will the neocons in Washington, realizing they've lost this epic battle for the future control and order of the world, take the whole world down with them in a nuclear Armageddon? Stas, that's where we're at today.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody in the West are gaslighting the world about the imminent threat of a nuclear war because of what is happening not only in Ukraine, what is happening in Palestine, what is happening in the East China Sea.
Right.
So to finish this little bit of an introduction, in late 2019, I knew I wanted to come back to Russia and to continue trying to show to the American people and others the truth about Russia as a country, the people, the history, the culture, the literature, and especially who President Putin is. I have covered so many of his speeches and his press conferences to try to show, primarily American people, that this man is not a tyrant. He is not a dictator. And Stas, the whole purpose of my being here is to try to show others that Russia is not our enemy.
Right. Yeah, he said 30 minutes to 30 seconds to midnight. Those are the good old days. I think we're at what, like 15 seconds to midnight right now?
Well, I'm actually remaking this film, Stas, to bring it up to date, and the new title is going to be The Final Countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2.
I hope you are not right. That's all I can say. I really, really hope you are not right. I'm afraid
Well, I'm
you
not
are right,
predicting.
but
I'm not predicting it's going to happen. I certainly don't want it to happen, but I think it's just an update with new information, new interviews of really how close we are today, like never before.
very
But
true.
you know, Stas, the thing you mentioned that I'm living in Yalta, and it is pretty close to paradise. Um, I've been here now for a little over 4 years. I came in March of 2020, 1 week before the COVID lockdowns. Uh, and
Good timing.
in this period, yeah, yeah, um, I have to tell you this, and whoever your followers are, since coming to Russia and living here, I believe I feel 10 years younger at least. I have more energy than I've ever had. I'm more productive than I ever have. Nearly 600 videos and podcasts created in just the last 4 years to try to show American people what life in Russia is really like. And I have to tell you this. Um, I've been happy and had a wonderful life as I am here.
And just for my viewers, so you understand, Regis isn't 60. He looks 60, but he's not 60. Uh, Regis, how old
There's
are you?
a few. No, I'm not going to say how old I am. You know, as a Russian, you should never ask anybody how old they
Oh,
are.
wait a minute. That's really just for women.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's
Well,
number one
let's
for
put it
women.
this way. I've made a few more trips around the sun since I was 60 years old.
A few is a very big understatement when we talk about it. And yeah, well, it's partially for our viewers. It's the food. Most of the chemicals and crap that's put into American food, the GMOs are all banned here. GMO in general is banned here, so the food is much better quality.
Well, I have to add to what you just said. Uh, when I go to the supermarket, it is not for meat, fruit, vegetables, anything fresh. We go to the market, comes straight from the farmers. And as you said, the food here is extremely good, clean. And when I say clean, no GMOs, no additives, none of this stuff. And I do think that's a big reason why many Russians, whether you live in a village or you live in a city, are so healthy. Uh, the other thing is, and I have to state this very clearly, Russia, everywhere I've been, and now here in Crimea, is so calm and peaceful and friendly. I don't see any of the stress, any of the chaos, any of the hysteria, there's hardly any crime. And all of these things have caused a great deal of stress and depression and people feeling overwhelmed in the United States and the West. And I think that also tends to make people healthier.
Of course, of course. Your stress reflex, the constant adrenaline, the dopamine's being pushed out, everything that's going through your brain. I mean, if you're in a constant stress, that's got to age you. I mean, that ages everything. Your body can't be constantly in stress. Fight or flight instinct cannot be maintained constantly. It's one of those, life or death. When the U.S. these days, that's all it is life and death for a lot of people, constantly
Yeah.
every day. Horrible.
You know, all of this is really, really difficult for most Americans to believe and even understand.
Yes.
And, you know, I refuse to condemn American people because what I believe has happened, Stas, and you've lived there for a number of years,
Oh yeah.
grew up, went to schools, went to university, a couple of degrees. We have been indoctrinated since childhood for several generations.
Yep. Yep.
Indoctrinated. I don't even call it propaganda because it happened in schools. It happened through civic events. It happened through church. It happened through families. There was this pride in America being great, exceptional, the one that's spreading freedom and democracy around the world, a city on a hill that's a light for all people. This is what we grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't grow up with knowing the real history of when those European invaders came here and killed over 100 million Native Americans in North and South America. We never learned about slavery. We only learned that Lincoln freed the slaves. We never learned about all of America. Yeah, we never learned about all of America's manifest destiny, which really meant America, those who control the country, believed that the rest of the United States was going to be theirs. And then when they had totally colonized all of the United States, they went to the Pacific. And then, since then, they've gone all over the world.
Yep.
And this to American people seems like a good thing. We're spreading freedom and democracy and human rights, but it's just the opposite. And Stas, I want to finish with this. What it takes to break out of that cocoon, to break out of that bubble, is some kind of a traumatic experience, which I had on Jeju Island in 2012, or it takes some other traumatic experience or disappointment where the dream of what America is explodes. And there are a number of ways that that can happen. My only hope is that with the impending economic and political crisis that is affecting all Americans, but the majority now are just beginning to feel the pain. And when it really hits, then I think many are going to realize that they have been lied to and betrayed.
You know, and what you're saying, it's not just manifest destiny. Well, you can look at the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine has been the curse of all curses for everybody south of the Rio Grande, because it just opened up effectively. Once it got, the U.S. had enough strength to enforce it, the U.S. has been the main brake on any development in Latin America, overthrowing governments, exploiting the people, and so on for over 100 years. But so you're saying in South Korea, so 50 years after this incident on Jeju Island, people were being disappeared for saying anything about it.
You could not say anything. You could not write articles. You could not do poetry. You could not do songs. And people did disappear. I have a good friend, born in South Korea, was a radical activist, has been living in the United States, who is afraid to return home to see his mother. His elderly, now maybe she's died by now. He appeared in my film, The Ghost of Jeju, and I blacked him out and did not put his name because he was afraid of retaliation right here in California. We're right there in California. And so this was real.
For Koreans, you know, venerating your ancestors is a big deal. It's not one of those things, yeah, I had a granddad. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. A real deep respect for the elders.
And then, yeah, so tell me, how did the U.S. government react to that documentary? I can't imagine they were happy about something like that coming out.
No, as far as I know, the government didn't react. I don't think they felt it was that big of a deal. It's like, I'm no Oliver Stone, right. And you know, my films are not seen in movie theaters by millions of people. They maybe by a few 100,000 people as it spreads around the world. But I basically am not a threat to them. I think maybe now, because I've been living in Russia and I've produced almost 600 films, videos, and video podcasts, that I would definitely not risk going back to the United States even to visit family, because I think they definitely know who I am because of where I am.
Now, as far as I know, if I'm not mistaken, YouTube took down all those videos.
Yeah, there were 550 videos on my original YouTube channel that were deleted for basically two reasons. For spreading uh, bad information about the virus, COVID.
Pandemic.
Because, yeah, I had interviewed and was interviewing a lot of people, doctors, uh, uh, scientists, journalists from around the world. And YouTube just didn't like that. On top of that, they did not like what I was saying about Russia. And so you get three strikes. And I got one strike, got the second strike, and didn't stop and was going to challenge them to see if I'd get the third strike. And I did. And they permanently deleted it. So after a period of time, I created another account, and I'm now on several different platforms: Substack, BitChute, Rumble, Twitter, Telegram, Odyssey, even RooTube, uh, so that these other channels so far haven't shown that they're prohibiting freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. And Facebook, I was locked out of Facebook for a year, again, for posting shows about the scamdemic. And I finally got back on, and I've avoided that issue, but I've been posting everything about Russia, all of my political views, all of the interviews, life in Russia, and they haven't had any problem with it so far.
Amazing, because I've been banned on Facebook quite a few times too. Facebook, which is banned in Russia. Now, Facebook, which is banned in Russia, doesn't mean Russians can't get on. They can get on VPN. That's perfectly legal. The reason the Russian government banned Facebook in Russia is, one, that Facebook was allowing calls for the murder of Russians. And by banning Facebook in Russia, they're not so much banning Russians for being on Facebook, they're banning Facebook for making any money off of ads in Russia. That cost Facebook about $1 billion when they lost the Russian market.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's the only way you get these groups, is you hit them in the wallet.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. So
you can't appeal to morality to those that don't have any morality.
Yeah, and I would like to say this. People in America and across Europe think that Russia is a dictatorship, Putin is a tyrant, that there's no democracy, there's no freedom of speech. And I tell people, the only law that I know of that prohibits speech is coming out with anything against the troops or the special military operation. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that there was a law that was passed, and I was warned to be careful not to say anything negative about the special operation. To my knowledge, I don't know that there's anything else that prohibits. I have friends who are communists. When I visited Moscow, they were visiting Lenin's tomb each week, doing a rally and a protest. They were organizing. I have several other friends who are vehemently anti-Putin, not many. And I recorded them, they're in my videos. Nothing has happened to them, nothing has happened to me. So I think it's tolerated. And, the other thing, people say, well, Putin, he's a murderer, he assassinates his opposition. They have no proof of any of that. And my response is, if you can't provide the proof, you need to shut up. Yeah. But if you look closely at Putin's record for the last 24 years, there is no indication of one strain of violence in that man's body, in his language, and in all of the works that he's accomplished in the last 24 years. There's just no opposition because he is so popular. This last election, Stas, you and I both know it. He got, what was it, 80%, 87% of the vote across all of Russia?
87% of the vote with a 76% turnout. And by the way, I
Yeah,
also voted for Putin, so I'm part of that 87 with a 76% turnout.
yeah.
76%
So
turnout. How much is the US getting on the average election? Like 30 something, 40% turnout?
yeah, lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And election days are holidays in Russia.
yeah. That's right. That's right. And not only one day. Like, wasn't it 3 days this year?
Yeah, it was three
I think
days.
it. Yeah, it was over the weekend and then a holiday, so people had all kinds of opportunity to go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And voting registrations online, it's very easy. The system makes sure you can't register more than once because you do have to bring your ID with you. But you register wherever it's close to your home. If you need to move your registration, like say you're on a business trip, easy. You've got video cameras, web cameras on all the locations. I mean, it's pretty open and you know it's see through. You can
You know, I
any polling
I
place.
went. Yeah, I went with my partner who voted, and it was right in the neighborhood, and it was kind of a rainy day, and it might have been the last day, so there weren't a lot of people. There was no line, and I went right in with her, and I sat there, and I was even chatting a little bit with the security guards, and the only thing that I couldn't take any pictures. They didn't want me to take any pictures, but I said, you know, I'd love to show American people what voting is like here in Russia. It was so organized, and as you said, uh, the opportunity for fraud. People have to bring their identification. You have to prove who you are and where you live. Uh, you know, in the United States, you show up and you give your name. If you're registered, they check it off. They don't
Yeah,
ask to see your passport or your driver's license, nothing.
because that's racist.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, because minorities can't get an identification. They're not smart enough to get an identification. That's what the liberals say, anyways.
yeah,
Insanity.
yeah.
But I interviewed a guy by the name of Adrian McCree. He is an Australian businessman who also happens to be a local politician. So on his own dime, he came to Russia and he was an observer. As you know, in the U.S., observers can't go in. They can't go, and there's very few foreign observers allowed. They can't go into the actual polling. They can only be outside of it. He was allowed to go in. He was even allowed to help count. And he came back to Australia and he told the truth. And he has been just blacklisted as enemy number one in Australia. I mean, the media, the wholehearted media went after him, and they've just been going after him for the last half a year. And the
Yeah,
funny
you know,
part, I'm sorry, one last Ted. The funny part, he said he gave a speech. They had a lot of foreign observers together as a going away. He gave a speech, and then everybody told him, "You're so brave." And he said, "I didn't think I was brave. I didn't know what they were talking about until I got back to Australia."
yeah. You know, I have two friends uh, who were invited to be observers. Uh, one of them was in Moscow, and the other one, I don't know if it was in Yakutsk or somewhere out in the Far East. And they both, I didn't interview them, but they told me this. They both uh, adamantly agreed that Russia, there's nothing like this in the United States. So straightforward, so simple, so organized, and the possibility for any kind of ballot stuffing just didn't exist here. And I know that there are others, many others, who were here as observers from around the world, all came back with the same opinion. Nobody accused Russia of a fraudulent election. Nobody.
We've got about 6 minutes left on today's show. So speaking of fraudulent elections, let's go back to 2020 and the upcoming American elections. What is your opinion as far as 2020's honesty as elections go with Biden and the upcoming elections?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say this. I stopped voting in the United States after the first Obama election. It took not long for me to figure out that this man was a fraud He's a ventriloquist. He say one thing and do another. He was so sweet and charming, and the lovely family and all that crap. But he didn't follow through on any of uh, his election promises. And when I saw that, again, it was part of the awakening. I realized that the entire process was fraudulent and rigged. So the 2020 election between Donald Trump running for re-election and Joseph Biden, if Americans couldn't realize after that election that it was fraudulent, that it was rigged, and Stas, in the past 3.5, almost 4 years, Obama and his whole clan, Hillary Clinton, the Biden people, they have gone after Trump illegally. They've used the Justice Department. They've rigged the courts and the justices. They have gone after him without any pause, without any break, and they've tried to accuse him of misdemeanors at the most. In fact, this conviction that just came down against him was something just a little bit more than a misdemeanor, which would never require jail time. And yet, the Justice Department, which was, I think, for the first time blatantly abused by Hillary Clinton, the lies that they made up about Trump and Putin, the whole Russophobia. As somebody who's not any longer indoctrinated or brainwashed, I looked at that, and you know what I said? I said, you know what? This next time, violence will break out. And I'll tell you this, if Trump is not elected, and I'm not saying I wouldn't vote for anybody. I don't vote for anybody anymore. And I'm not saying I like Trump. I'm not saying he's the best. He's the only one out there now opposing Joseph Biden. He has 80 million people at least that voted for him the last time. There will be more this time. And I have a very personal contact who told me that he is well armed, stocked up on ammunitions, gas, water, and food, because he believes that if Trump somehow is cheated again, mass violence is going to break out across the country. And I fear that more than anything.
Honestly, I don't think Trump will ever be allowed near power, and I'll explain why. The judicial system, for those that don't know, haven't been paying attention. First of all, this is a federal offense that Trump committed, that Hillary paid $8,000 fine for. Exact same thing. Just compare $8,000 to jail time. This is a federal offense that was tried in a New York State court. Not allowed. You cannot try federal crimes in a state court. The number 3 guy in the Justice Department, federal Justice Department, went down and became a state prosecutor with a jury that was handpicked. The judge was a direct donor and large volume donor to Biden, and sold seats to his backers on the front rows of the trial to witness the trial. I mean, this is worse than old Soviet kangaroo courts. Those try to look legitimate, at least. But what I'm saying is, if you look historically, once one party in any country uses the judicial system to suppress the opposition parties, it never gives up power because it knows it'll happen to them the moment they leave.
Yeah. Well, I think if something terrible doesn't happen to Trump, he will win the election. Whether or not he can avoid the John Fitzgerald Kennedy silver bullet or not remains to be seen. But he is really going up against some very powerful and very violent people who will stop at nothing, as you said, to retain their power and their wealth.
Absolutely.
More than interesting times in the United States and the world, very dangerous times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, by the way, anybody listening, think what Regis is saying. It's a good time to look at other options. Whether or not you're going to hunker down whether or not you're going to participate in one side or the other, or whether or not you may want to take a long vacation somewhere far away while you still can.
Yeah, like to Yalta.
Like the Yalta, like the. By the way, have you seen? There's a phenomenon going on right now with this young American girl who was on the metro, and videos we were taking. The family that moved to Russia, and everybody's in love with her.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I watched that video yesterday on the road.
Yeah.
The comments are great. I mean, they're almost all in Russian, but yeah, they're great. I mean, the people just are in love with this little girl, this American little girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, we've got less than a minute, so I want to thank everybody who joined us. Regis, come out, watch Regis's documentaries. They're well worth watching. And his podcast, which I get to be a guest on once in a while, so I'm quite happy with that too. Thank
Yeah,
you,
the best place is Substack. They can find me at Regis Tremblay on Substack, and they can search for the films, and there's tons of videos and podcasts.